Here.
Sanderson.
Here.
Patey.
Here.
Ahart.
Here.
Proctor.
Here.
Trotter.
Here.
Bertles.
Here. I would like to welcome our visitors to tonight's special board meeting, and at this time, ask all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I will entertain a motion to approve the January 13th, 2025 special agenda as it has been presented this evening.
Move to approve.
Second.
And any questions? Please call the roll.
Fund.
Yes.
Brumback.
Yes.
Delariva.
Yes.
Sanderson.
Yes.
Patey.
Yes.
Ahart.
Yes.
Bertles.
Yes. At this time, the board has set aside time for anyone wishing to address the board. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address us? Seeing none, we will go on to our discussion item, which is Vision 2030, and we will turn this over to Dr. Shelton, please.
All right, so I'm actually gonna flip sides here, so I can see the slides without turning around. It's just gonna be a lot easier.
Oh.
So we have a copy of Vision 2030 coming around. And I'll start building some, sounds weird over here. Sounds very different. I'll start building some context for where Vision 2030 came from. And the board was not a member of IASB when Vision 2020 happened, but Vision 2020 was something that was created in the mid-20-teens as an advocacy platform for public education in the state of Illinois, and was passed at that point by, resolutions were passed by Board of Education. So this is really a joint venture of these 8 organizations. I mentioned IASB, but ISA was part of the conversation, IPA, IASBO, the ROE organization, Association of Rural Small Schools, and again, just that concept that if we can come together and agree on an advocacy platform that can help drive a legislative agenda within the state, it just makes public education better. So they started about a year and a half ago with a Vision 2030 work group. And from the southwestern region, the region we're in for both IASB and ISA, for the superintendent side, Jill Griffin, the superintendent with Thalto, and Brad Scourge, the superintendent at Collinsville, represented our region as part of this work group. They brought together about 100 people to really talk about what do we want to do to shape public education moving forward. And the idea is that these are things that pass by 2030. So that's where that Vision 2030 comes. It builds on Vision 2020. And so in Vision 2020, and again, I was in Missouri, you all weren't part of IASB, and so it might be new information, but you'll hear some things that should resonate. Vision 2020 had 4 main areas: highly effective educators, 21st century learning, shared accountability, and equitable and adequate funding. And the things that came out of Vision 2020, the biggest one was EBF, evidence-based funding. And so that's the biggest talking point from Vision 2020, where EBF has increased state funding from $5.9 billion in 2017 to $8.28 billion in 2024. For our district specifically, EBF is about $250,000 ballpark a year in additional funding we get, and that is cumulative over the course of that 7 years. So we're up well over $1 million. But then you can see on the left-hand side, this is where the expansion of early childhood education came from. It's where the college career readiness standards came from and the work there. There's been work in professional development that has come out of Vision 2020. A balanced accountability system that now is getting ready to be revamped, and you'll see some reference to things that maybe were addressed but maybe not addressed in the best way, and so you'll see some revisiting of that. But it did speak loudly to our legislators in the state of Illinois when the organizations, those 8 organizations, could go and say, our constituents, our boards of education from all of our communities have passed this resolution indicating that they support this. It does speak loudly, and again, it did make change in Illinois in education. So you can probably immediately think of some things that you've heard over the past several years in Illinois that I'll call it things that might be broken, that might need to be addressed through Vision 2030, and you might see some of those things. So I've given you the big document. I'm really going to give this high-level overview, but if there's things you want to talk through more specifically, we can kind of dive into the document that's got some more information. So Vision 2030 has 3 main priorities, and within each of those priorities, there are things separated into, they call them ideals and then policies, and many times those things kind of match. But I'm going to share both of them just because sometimes the language in one I think is better than the other, but I want to make sure you see both. So it's around future-focused learning, shared accountability, and predictable funding. You can imagine that EBF continues to be a big talking point with school districts to make sure that the funding mechanism to make public schools equitable across the state. So, and I'll give you just the 20-second version of EBF, but in EBF, districts are divided into one of 4 tiers. There are tiers that are what we consider less than adequate funding, and the goal is to get every district to 90% adequacy. And there are districts that are above equitable funding, and we're not going to take money from those districts because they're locally funded. So we are a tier 2 district, which means we do get extra funding from EBF, but if you're a tier 3 district, you get very, very little extra funding, and if you're a tier 4 district, you get 0 new funding from EBF. If you're a tier 1 district, you're going to get bigger chunks of money to try to close that adequacy gap. Does that make sense? So you'll see some reference there. So in future-focused learning, the idea is that we're reshaping schools and really looking at what do students need to be successful post-high school, and they've identified 4 things in there. Future-driven skills that allow for more college career exploration, so again, building on the college career readiness standards. Student safety is going to be a big component in well-being. Attracting and retaining a high-quality and diverse educator pipeline, and I don't know if your social media feeds look like mine, but if they do, you've started to see ads from Teach in Illinois come up on social media feeds. So they're starting to say teachers in Illinois make 18% more on average than any surrounding state, trying to attract people to Illinois to work. So attracting and retaining that high quality, diverse educator pipeline, and promoting curriculum and instructional flexibility to meet the unique needs of local communities. We've started to see a little bit of that as new curriculum initiatives come down from ISB. There's a little bit of, hey, local folks, here are some choices. Any of these kind of comply with state standards. Which one would you like to? And the most recent one for us was the Illinois sex health curriculum standards. So in future-focused learning, the 4 ideals are the resources for safe buildings, so making sure that each of our schools and our communities have what they need to maintain a sense of safety. Looking at mandates, and I don't know if, for those of you who were at the Chicago conference, I think they referenced it, I know they did at our superintendent conference, but from 2010 to today, and Jennifer, is that correct on the state mandates on the school code? Mm-hmm. The school code has doubled in size. Mm-hmm. So what used to be a volume this thick is now 2 volumes this thick with school mandates. And so last year there were over 100 bills involving public education that were passed and signed by the governor. So just to give you an idea, very few cut, lots added onto the plate. And so this is really the time to start to say, where can we start to maybe carve out some things that maybe don't make sense in terms of a mandate. Looking at emerging career fields and looking at early elementary school, K-5, starting that's where you start your college career pathway, where you start thinking about what you might want to be. And a lot of times it's about exposure, not about teaching kids skills necessarily. When I was in a district in Missouri, they had, starting in kindergarten, specific career paths that they helped students explore and be knowledgeable of, so that when they got to middle school, they could enroll in courses that interest them. And they weren't your general things that you know about. And then excellent educators. Opportunities to develop new approaches to attract and retain excellent educators. Encouraging people to go into education, and that started with ISB, but they want the legislative advocacy to go behind that as well. Specifically, special education, math and science, and bilingual education, which are all areas that are high need areas across the state. So from a policy perspective, when it comes to future-focused learning, again, you're going to see the same things kind of reiterated just in different language. but attract and retain high-quality, diverse educators, future-driven skills, student safety, well-being in facilities, and promoting curriculum and instructional flexibility that meet the needs of local communities. Questions on the first highlights? And again, if you look at page 5 in the packet I gave you, you'll see just a little bit more information. And so, for example, on page 7, you're going to see promoting dual credit, expanding the dual credit teacher pool, looking at AI, all these things that really, when you think about future in public education, things that behind the scenes, we're talking about what that could look like or what could happen, but this gives you a platform to do that. Any other comments or questions?
Do you know if they've discussed that last one, study the impact of AI? I know this is 2030,
Uh-huh.
but they're talking about doing that before?
So from a policy perspective, I don't know the answer to that. 'Cause I have not heard anything from my contacts with legislature. I will say from a practice standpoint, absolutely. IASA is doing a lot right now to encourage districts to develop policy around AI, and as well as just best practice. Because we have teachers right now that are using AI. We have
Students.
students that are
Right.
using AI. And there's different schools of thought about whether that's good or bad or indifferent. And I think it's when Google came out and we said, make kids use an encyclopedia because Google's not going to be here forever. And now we tell them, go Google it, right? So AI is not going to go away. It's only going to get better, and it's only going to be a tool that we need to teach people to use. But to do that, we need to establish policy and parameters around what that looks like.
So one of the sentences under Section 1 says that they would produce a toolkit regarding the responsible use of AI in Illinois K-12 schools. What kind of time frame would we do? So I feel like AI and the use of AI is accelerating faster than some of these decisions. So when would we expect a toolkit or any kind of thing like that? I mean, because we need it right now.
I won't speak for legislators, so, but I do think that's something that we should be advocating for. But I don't know that you also have to wait on legislative action to create best practice and to talk about what's going on.
I understand.
So I will tell you, Tara and I are going to a one-day AI super region summit in February to start to look at what would AI look like, and that's something we've talked about, is developing a task force for next year that would start to study what it could look like and what are the parameters around AI use in District 7.
So my other question is, with the K-12 teachers teaching dual credit courses, what kind of requirements do we have, and how challenging is it to meet those requirements?
So that's a loaded question. So in order to be approved for dual credit instruction, you have to have a master's degree in that field of study, or a certain number of credit hours and a master's degree. So you could have a master's degree in curriculum instruction, but you have to have your 18 hours of math. And that's from the Higher Ed Commission is who dictates that. So ISB has nothing to do. ISB handles the K-12 certification, but then you also have to have a post K-12 certification.
But that's post-grad,
Post-
18 hours.
Post-grad 18 hours,
Yeah.
correct, not part of your degree. So really challenging, especially when most people, when they go back and get their master's degree, they get it in curriculum instruction or administration,
Okay.
or generally special education. That's a pretty common one. Very few teachers go back and get their master's degree in history or in math or in English. That's something that has become a little point of contention between the community college organizations and the K-12 organizations, because we want to expand dual credit opportunities for kids, but we can't find people to teach the courses that are approved by higher ed.
And does the same thing apply for AP courses? What are the requirements for
No,
those?
AP training,
AP
which is the argument that the community college board doesn't make sense, right? Because, or the community college pathway.
Right,
Because in some ways, you would say an AP course is just as rigorous, if not more rigorous, than a dual credit course from Lewis and Clark. So you're taking AP English, but you don't have to have a master's degree in English, but you're taking a dual credit course, but you do, right?
Yeah.
Those two things don't add up.
So, I look at, like, I'm just going to use a student that I know, took a AP chemistry, I think it was Chem 2, or chemistry, AP chemistry. And then she majored in chemistry in college, and she's like, I really didn't need to take Chem 1 my freshman year. But she took it anyway. She could have just started off in 200 level or 300 level of chemistry very easily. So we know that we get some teachers that really are highly skilled at the high school level.
Sure.
At teaching AP courses.
Absolutely. Other comments or questions about the first one? One of the ones I'll point out. Go
Are
ahead.
you talking about just the first
Just the
section
first-
or
yeah,
just that?
Just the first section. Yep,
Or number 2 as well, the whole first section?
the whole first section.
Okay. All right.
You can highlight anything you want. You want to talk about enhanced student safety?
Yes, so I guess I really appreciated that they talked about student outcomes and school safety, and how do we support that? So, in this, they said all students have the right to be educated in quality facilities that are conducive to learning and safe for all students and personnel. And I just appreciated that they recognized that as a very serious thing for Illinois
So
educators.
keep a
and
mental note when
communities.
we get to the funding piece, because that's going to come up when we get to funding.
Right?
In this advocacy platform. The other one I'll highlight for our district is our teacher education program is continuing to grow and expand. So we have students who take a teacher education course, Teacher Education 1, Teacher Education 2. That's a junior, senior level course. And then they spend as part of their 2 course, they spend part of every week in a classroom in I'll call it a pseudo student teaching structure, so that they've got experience with students, they've got experience in classrooms. Ideally, what we want to see is in 4 years, some of those teachers come back to District 7 and teach. And several districts throughout the state have put some other type of incentive programs in place, whether it's a sign-on bonus or a guaranteed interview or a hiring bonus, anything like that, that can help entice having our graduates come back to District 7. That's something they do a lot anyway, but I think if we can have our students who we know have had exposure already within the district go out and get their 4-year and then come back, that's going to be a big bonus for us.
And looking at number 2, the enhanced student safety and well-being. Well-being to me, maybe this is my nurse background though, means your mental health well-being, and that is not what this is about. It's
Well, if you look at the top of page 8, that last portion that kind of gets hidden is the support for the whole child. And that's the holistic view of everything involving what you're talking about is really around mental health and everything.
yeah, but the other stuff really doesn't speak to it.
The other stuff is physical safety.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, I'm going to move on to the next section, which is shared accountability. Thinking beyond annual standardized tests to more fairly and effectively measure student success by considering growth and proficiency over time. This has been a conversation that's been going on since No Child Left Behind came across decades ago. And one of the challenges that we have is, and this is not, it's across the nation, we look at one assessment as the measure of a school's success. And we know that that one assessment from a best practice standpoint is how that one child performed on that one day on that one specific assessment, and not necessarily how they've grown over time, nor how they may have tested on their best day or worst day, right? Now, some of that is, I always said as a principal, I want my students to test every day like it's their best day, because I don't want to go to my doctor on a day that he's not at his best, right? I want to go to my doctor on the day that he's on his best, which should be every day. But how do we really look at assessment and at learning and take that into the accountability model that's fair, right? As opposed to this one shot. So the first one is to reform the Illinois assessment system to be a timely, useful measure of proficiency and growth. There have been conversations for at least a decade that I'm aware of where we've talked about assessing students multiple times throughout the year and using that as a tool. The problem is when you get, and I don't mean this in a bad way, I kind of do, when you get government involved in state testing, we assign contracts to vendors, and then we administer a test, and then we have to wait 10 to 12 weeks to get the results back. And that's not a good instructional practice, right? That's an autopsy of what happened. 12 weeks later, we've moved on. And so what you have to figure out an assessment process where you can get immediate feedback for a student. Now, I think we're getting closer to that the more we have AI and the more we have tools that can grade for us, but that's going to be one of the challenges. Reform current accountability system to provide local flexibility for identifying indicators that create a more holistic view of student success. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then reform the mandate process to ensure implementation procedures. Here's this mandates again that promote flexibility and local decision making. So again, if you look at page 10, 11, 12, that's where we're going to be.
And, you know, with that one, there was one sentence that really struck me, and that was that Illinois outperforms the national average on the National Assessment of Education Progress, but according to Illinois Assessment of Readiness, the IAR, roughly only 30% of students meet proficiency standards.
Correct.
And so what I appreciated that they kind of pointed out where are those proficiency benchmarks should be aligned to national distributions. I thought that was something that was very valuable.
And that's something that I believe we're going to see start to be put in place next year. That's something that Dr. Sanders has been very passionate about, is that when Illinois established their cut scores on our state assessments, those cut scores were established extremely high, so we were one of the most rigorous states in the country. And instead, what it looks like is most of our kids are failing. Whereas if you took a student who is not proficient in Illinois and put them in a different state, they would show up as a proficient student. And so that's just one of those pieces. I already talked about the unofficial results, but that's just one of those pieces that we're already seeing pathways towards that with the state board the way it is right now.
And so, I mean, they talked a little bit about district flexibility and providing local school districts with the option to administer periodic benchmark assessments. Is that something that you think would work here?
So we kind of do that already with FastBridge.
Okay.
So FastBridge is really our periodic assessment program to really identify students who are in need of intervention. I think this would give you another option where you wouldn't have to purchase the ability to do that. But we have that ability now, but we've only had it for 4 years. I think we're 4 or 5 years into FastBridge. So it's not been that long for us.
I was going to say.
So is it important for Edwardsville School District's scores compared to other school district scores versus students beginning of the year versus end of the year, but all within Edwardsville? You know, where's
Yes and yes.
the benchmark sit?
I mean, yes and yes, because we want to know how students have grown within our system, but we also want to know how our students do compared to other districts. I mean, because in reality, that's who you're being compared against. So we have to keep that measure from district to district, but we also need to keep the measure internally.
So also the exemplary, to be qualified as exemplary, a school must be in the top 10%. Well, I love how they're advocating change for that. And I appreciated that they should that the document says they should forego the current ranking system and instead establish clear performance thresholds for summative designations in a manner that does not mathematically prohibit schools from receiving favorable summative
So
designations.
I was actually going to talk about this one.
Oh,
I was going
okay.
to use Woodland as the example. So Woodland is designated as being in school improvement because they scored lower than other districts. It had nothing to do with the actual score. It had to do with the comparison score. So the downside of that is if Woodland improved 80% next year and every other district improved 90, they would be identified as being improvement still, even though they improved dramatically. Now, that's not going to happen because they're doing really well, but you also can't be identified as an exemplary school because it's in comparison. And so what Dr. Sanders is working on currently is more of a criterion reference where you're looking at achieving certain benchmarks, and once you achieve the benchmarks, you are now designated as an exemplary school as opposed to doing it in comparison with other schools.
And in all honesty, it's been a moving target.
Yes, yes.
So it's been difficult for districts to anticipate how they're going to
Correct.
be rated because of that moving
Yeah.
target.
Yeah, it's like the shell game. You pick up the cup and you don't know whether it's going to be there or not. The third one is about mandates. Again, reforming the mandate process to provide more flexibility in local decision making. And you're hearing this theme of giving more local control, and that's kind of the theme that's kind of going on throughout the state. When you look at mandates, the other piece and I'm on page 12, the third one, but that second bold line, reviewing proposed mandates for financial and operational impact. There's more and more traction behind this, but it still has yet to get its due diligence in Springfield. There was a bill that was sponsored by Ludo last year that would have required any new initiative or any new mandate for schools have a fiscal study done first. And it did not get approved by the legislature because they don't want to see, I care about your initiative and whether there's financial, but my own, I really don't care about, I just want to see it pass, right?
Yeah.
So we've been told that's probably not going to gain a lot of traction, but I do think there needs to be some traction for that. Because again, school code's doubled in time, and all of that is resources that it takes school districts to meet the needs. We talked, I think it was a little over a year ago, about there was a recommendation coming out of Springfield, out of our state organizations, that if you're a large district, you're going to need one person just to make sure you're compliant with all the school code things. That's going to be a full-time administrative job just to make sure that you're being compliant. And now ISA offers that as a contract service. They will come in and for small districts, for a nice price, they will make sure that you're being compliant with all your school code mandates. So that tells you there's too many. Other highlights or questions, let me jump to the policy slide real quick. So reforming the assessment system, reforming accountability, and reforming mandates. Those are the three big bullets under the shared accountability piece.
So Lynn and I went to Sparta for the Illinois Association of School Boards meetings, and actually that discussion on mandates came up with Representative Harris and Representative Illick and Senator Bryant. And so they recognize that as being a very serious issue, which it's nice to see that legislators are concerned about that.
It's a conversation I have with Katie as well, and she's very aware.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, Katie Stewart was not able to.
Yeah,
make
she
that
wasn't
meeting.
able to make it.
Mhm.
Okay, and then the third area is around predictable funding. So this is where you're going to see kind of I'll call it the bow get put on the package, because a lot of this is how do you fund some of those reforms, and this is one of the things that you're going to hear about. So protecting the integrity and funding of evidence-based formula funding, strengthening public education through pension reform. We haven't talked a lot about pension reform in our large group, but I know you have received emails about Tier 2 pension and know that is a big topic, especially in 2025 as we're getting ready to hit safe harbor for some people. And I can talk about that in just a second. Establishing equitable statewide funding sources for capital and safety needs, and we'll talk about that. And then enhancing financial flexibility for school districts. So if you look at predictable funding, number one, it's continuing to fulfill the promise of allocating a minimum of $350 in EBF, $350 million. The issue is right now we're starting to see the state economy and revenue really start to slow. Yeah. And they're predicting a $3 billion shortfall in next year's budget. And so what that means is, and this is, Terry, I'm not trying to push a button, I swear, but I'm going to push a button. EBF will get funded, but they'll prorate more categorical grants and special education grants and things like that. So you've got to watch the bigger picture of how the whole balance sheet, right? Because if we get $225,000 or $250,000 in EBF funding, but they cut categoricals to the point of $350,000, we're $100,000 in the red, right?
Which is something that we see all the time in transportation.
Yep.
So they've increased
Yep.
special ed transportation, and so we saw that increase this year. But then we see a decrease in the overall transportation funding.
Right.
And so that's something that we continually are going to face.
Yeah.
You did push a button.
I know it. And one of the, I think the merits of EBF is now other groups within the state are wanting their version of EBF. So that shows you that it's closing the equity gap when community colleges and four-year universities, they want EBF as well. So they're seeing that it's working, and so we need to make sure that we're holding that.
Terry and I were at a session at the conference also, but there's a lot of schools that are still way behind, like 66%.
Yep.
And it was shocking to see that. And
Yeah.
with the budget shortfalls coming, it's going to really pinch
Mhm.
education
It
across
really
the
is.
state.
It really is.
And I think it's important to recognize that EBF is a very good guide for us, but we also need to look forward and make changes as necessary. That it's not just a very static
Yes.
type of approach. We need to look forward and see how we can tweak and improve it as well.
And there
I
is
had some opinions, but
there is a strong, a loud group out there that advocates for full funding of the adequacy target for every school district in one fell swoop. That financially won't happen without bankrupting
Oh,
other
right.
things.
Yeah.
But
That's
people
a great
recognize that schools are underfunded and it has been significantly
Yeah.
impacted schools.
you know, and that's where, you know, it goes back to, are we providing each and every child in the state of Illinois the education that they are entitled
Mhm.
to?
You'll see the bottom two bold prints under the integrity of EBF is continuing EBF and mandated categorical, so that's listed in there. But also transparency and accountability about how EBF is used. And every year we get something from our state organization that says, hey, can you fill out a form, SB does it too, on how EBF is used in your district. And so essentially saying, if you didn't get EBF, what would go away? Well, I mean, for us, it's well over $1 million, and Dave, I'm probably closer to 2 million?
Yeah.
2 million in revenue that we get in EBF. So that's a lot of people that are supporting our kids and supporting our schools. Pension reform, changes to current pension model has to happen to attract and retain high-quality staff. Right now, and it has to happen without school districts taking the burden of it. That's another piece, because there have been legislation that's been floated where the school district takes on a bigger percentage of the pension funding, and that's just not current in our budget. Just to make sure everybody understands, tier two employees, tier 2 teachers, right now have to have 45 years of experience to have full retirement at age 67. And that is even tiered over the course of time. So whereas if you're a tier 1 employee, 2.2% per year is your retirement, based on 35 full years of teaching, which gets you to 75%. And in a tier 2 system, you start out at 2, you go to 1.8, you go to 1.6, and you end up at 60. Jennifer, is it 60%? Something like that?
I'm over here crying
Yeah.
because I'm a tier 2.
Yes, I know.
Sorry.
And so we know that educators are not going to choose to come to Illinois if they have a choice, because you're going to work until you're 67. By comparison, if you are in Missouri, full retirement is around 51 with 30 years experience. So that's the rule of 80, your age and your years of experience. And then it's at 80% of your salary, not 75 or less. So, but the other piece with tier 2 is there's, and I'm going to try to explain this, and somebody else may have to jump in and help me. So there's what's called the safe harbor provision, where you can't make less than what you would make with Social Security. And if you do, then all of a sudden, everybody in that job classification now has to pay into Social Security, because now you're eligible for Social Security. Right now, Illinois teachers do not receive Social Security. So we receive Medicaid when we get to that point, but there is no Social Security unless you've earned your 40 credits somewhere else within the system. Once that first employee hits that safe harbor provision, and we believe it will be sometime in 2025, then every Illinois teacher and every Illinois school district is now going to have to pay into Social Security, which is also going to be 4.5% of our budget that we do not, or 4% of our salaries that we do not currently have budgeted. Everybody knows this is a huge issue. Everybody believes there needs to be a fix to the issue. Nobody can nobody can come to an agreement on how to fix the issue, because it requires money. And so somehow that's going to have to change. I was reminded today that I wasn't here when tier 2 came into, I was in Illinois, I was in Missouri. But one of the things that they mentioned was that tier 2 was not a well thought out retirement plan. They couldn't remember if it was in lame duck or in the veto session, but it wasn't passed in a regular session. It was a very quick, hey, this is the way we can fix the pension system in Illinois, because we still are $3 billion in the hole in the pension system in Illinois. So there has to be a solution for that.
But how does the federal law that was signed impact that? Didn't
The
that
new one, the
sign-
one that was just signed?
Mhm.
So all that does is eliminate the windfall provision for current people who earned their 40 credits somewhere else. So so I'll use myself as an example. So I have my 40 credits. I earned my 40 credits through university stuff and work in other places. So when I retire, those 40 credits now get me retirement. But because I'm in the Illinois pension system, that is reduced by a certain amount for every dollar I make. So my $884, I'm making up that number, actually ends up being about $95 because of the pension system. That is now gone. Make sense? That's the best way I can explain it. Yeah, so it's a huge advantage for teachers, but teachers who went into this knowing we were never going to get Social Security out of it anyway.
There was a concept that they were afraid people were going to double dip,
Correct.
and they didn't want that to happen.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And as you probably have already seen in the news, all that does is tax the Social Security system even
Right,
more.
right, I knew
So that
that part.
instead of having 21 years, if that, we're probably down to 15. I mean, it's something like that. So,
Sounds about right.
yeah. So the third piece of this is establish equitable funding sources for capital and safety needs. And this is where the county facilities sales tax is being advocated for to be a statewide initiative. They've done that in Iowa. They did it the same way Illinois was doing it, where it was by county, that counties could pass the facility sales tax, and then once you had a certain percentage of the counties, they advocated for legislatures to put it into place. The way the county facility sales tax works is, and there are communities around us that have it, not around our county. 1% of the sales tax collected in the county is set aside for school capital projects, and then that's distributed on a student enrollment basis. So if there are 50,000 students enrolled in Madison County and we have 7,500 of them, we would get whatever that is, 11% of the sales tax revenue. This came up on the ballot in 2016 in Madison County, was voted down. Has not been on the ballot since, but in that time, my understanding was that would have been 6 to 8 million or so in revenue a year, specifically for facility projects. When I hear some of my superintendent colleagues who are in counties that have the facility sales tax, it's absolutely crazy what they're doing to their buildings, building new high schools, building new career centers, building new athletic complexes, just because the money's there. So now you don't rely on a bond, you rely on the sales tax, and you rely on the tourism that comes to your county and things like that. So when you think about some of the things that happen in Edwardsville now with the big tournaments, the Criterium that comes in, the Route 66 Festival, all that would be revenue that would help support facilities.
And it would alleviate property taxes as well, correct?
It could alleviate property taxes if the board did not pursue further construction bonds. So I'd be cautious to say how much, but that's something that we would certainly want to look at. Yes.
So, but it certainly would affect our operations and maintenance budget. And
100%.
And so, at that point in time, there could be, I think it was Alton that tried to run the yes vote for the facility sales tax, and they were talking about promising their school district a lower tax levy on.
I mean, inevitably, if you have a high bonds, if you've borrowed a lot of bonds now, at some point those are going to expire and your property tax rate is going to drop. One of the things that is being advocated for with this school facility sales tax is that you can also use it for school safety and mental health. And that's something that was an add-on in later county facility sales tax that passed, whereas the early ones did not have that ability. And so that is over half the school districts in the state that now have that facility sales tax. So it's not like it's 10% of school districts have it and everybody else is sitting on the sidelines. There have been conversations in area counties about this coming back on the ballot. I don't know how legitimate those are, but that's something that's being advocated for. You'll also see, and I'm only pointing this out because of kind of what the landscape is federally right now with the Department of Education, but you'll see expanding Title IV funding to increase school safety measures. That's a statewide advocacy that relies on federal dollars, But if you've listened to any of the Department of Education things, one of the things that's being discussed is a significant cut to all of the title programs.
Right.
Eliminating Title II, Title III, and Title IV, and significantly cutting Title I. So that's something that we're just kind of keeping our eye on, so that would obviously impact how much you could advocate for expanding the federal Title IV. And then the fourth one is enhancing flexibility for schools. So looking at permanent interfund transferability, we can transfer now. We typically don't do that, but that's something that you can do. Approving health life safety revenue to respond to the 10-year health life safety surveys, and not having ISB regulate that. And then looking at the debt extension around PTEL districts. So we are not a PTEL district. We don't have tax limitations. But Macoupin County is our neighboring county that does, and that significantly impacts how much they can levy in taxes. And then you can kind of see the policy, just kind of. So the four big talking points around Vision 2030 are safety, high quality educators, post-secondary success, and improving measurement around what we know is working in Illinois schools. And what each organization, again, you have the members there as well, but what each organization is asking is that every school district in the state pass a resolution in support of Vision 2030. And the goal is that over 90% of school boards throughout the state support Vision 2030 as the talking point for legislators, and that is what happened in Vision 2020. Questions?
Do they have the resolution prepared? I mean,
They
or
do.
is it something that we, okay.
Yeah, they do. That's the
Okay,
screenshot. That's
I'm
the
sorry,
screenshot of it,
gotcha.
but I will send it to everybody so you have it. You can see it.
And they're looking for boards to pass this about January.
January, February board meeting.
January.
Many boards, the boards who these committee members were part of and they knew it was coming, some of them did that in December. And so they're currently collecting. There's a place we can go and log in and say, yes, we passed it. And then there's some media things that we can go on to on our website, stating out for school so they understand what it's about as well.
So it's taking a look at who was all part of the committee. Was it one member from each district, region, county? Because I saw who our representative was in it.
For IASB
No.
or for IASA?
No,
Or
for this committee that put together Vision 2030.
Yep.
I saw that Collinsville superintendent was kind of the spokesperson for,
He was one, and Jill Griffin from Bethalto was the other. From the IASA perspective, but there were board members, ROE folks, all that were involved in this. So it wasn't just superintendents, but those were the ones
Right.
that,
It wasn't based on geographics, it was based on the various educational organizations within the state of Illinois, correct?
and regions.
And
Yes,
regions?
and regions.
Okay.
So like the southwestern region for IASA includes St. Clair County, Madison County, and what's Clinton County? Is that what's below St. Clair? Randolph County. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay.
Any comments, questions, or feedback?
So I was unaware of Vision 2020 because, of course, we weren't members of the IASB at that point in time. But I read through this, and I really like the fact that we have outlined some serious goals through 2030. And I think they're goals that I think really align with some of what we do here in Edwardsville School District and what some of our ideas about education are as well. So I appreciate it.
I am still a little disappointed there's not more mental health in here because it's become such a critical issue. I mean, I know the one says it, but it's one little line, but it's still good stuff.
I think what makes me a little nervous, because I am familiar with Vision 2020 and know the benefits that have come out of it, but I also can see when your vision is laser focused on something, other things get missed.
Mhm.
And so I hope that, that Edwardsville's board, over the next 15 years, because Vision 2030 is through the 30s, that over the next 15 years that the board is able to see the importance of Vision 2030, but not forget about the other important pieces to the education process for students and for the community.
So timeline will.
So we'd like to bring something to the board in January at the 27th meeting, the resolution to pass and support it.
So we should, as board members, review the resolution. You said you would send that to us.
I will send it to
And then
you.
if we have questions,
Please reach out.
okay, get them to you.
Yes.
And then you can.
And if I don't know
address-
the answer, I can get to the folks who know the answers.
Okay.
So just tying in Lynn and Jennifer's comments. So I see what you're saying, where it doesn't say, you're saying it doesn't really talk about mental health, and you're saying we shouldn't be just stuck with this. So it would be our responsibility to really identify how do we support mental health within the schools district, and how do we continue to do that over the next,
Yeah, how do we continue to support the
future.
needs of this community and this district while maintaining the integrity of Vision 2030 and meeting those unique needs?
And that's where the strategic plan comes into play.
Yeah, you're right.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we will move on to the action considerations. Approval of action item 3.1, Dr. Shelton.
Thank you. To recommend that the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the resignations and retirements of employees as presented.
move for approval.
Second.
And questions? Please call the roll.
Della Riva,
Yes.
Fund,
Yes.
Brumback,
Yes.
Sanderson,
Yes.
Patey,
Yes.
Ahart,
Yes.
Bertles.
Yes. Approval of action item 3.2, Dr. Shelton.
Thank you. To recommend that the Board of Education approve personnel matters related to the appointment, employment, compensation, or transfer of employees, pending required certifications and professional educator license, completion of paperwork, and all background fingerprint checks completed and cleared as presented.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any questions? Please call the roll.
Sanderson,
Yes.
Della Riva,
Yes.
Brumback,
Yes.
Fund,
Yes.
Patey,
Yes.
Ahart,
Yes.
Bertles.
Yes. And our last item is adjournment, but Dr. Shelton, can I ask you to remind people of the survey that got put out to the public for their response?
You can. The Transportation School Start Time Survey is open, and it will be open through Sunday at 5 o'clock. We have over 1,200 responses so far, so a lot of good feedback. And we'll be reviewing that at Board Retreat on the 25th. So please, please, please log in and give us your feedback.
Okay, thank you. With no further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.